I'm coming out of bodega, and some Spanish kids are rapping, and the biggest one says, yo, let me rap, twin, let me rap. And he started going, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Boom, he stopped.
Big Pun was like the real gangster out of the whole Terror Squad all that other I mean, because, you know, back then, Terror Squad, there was a reason why their name was Terror Squad. Like, Pun really went out there and did the shit. So.
About one, Pun is doing this, pointing at everybody in the room. There's about 20 people in the house. He pointing at each one of them one by one. Yo, show P your gun. Yo, show P your gun. Show P your gun. Now there's mad guns out.
Big Pun may not have been in the game for long, but he accomplished more in his short career than most artists achieve in decades. He broke records and inspired a whole new generation of rappers to step into the booth.
First I think soloists in hip-hop to ever get a platinum. And that's especially because, you know, we love hip-hop. Yeah. You know, and as kids, we need somebody to look to strive further. I mean.
But behind the scenes, Pun was fighting several personal demons, and tragically, his life was cut short by a fatal heart attack at just 28 years old. Let's dive in. When Pun was a kid, everything seemed cool at first. He grew up in the South Bronx with his parents, his brother, and his sisters, and in those early days, life felt good. The family was together, and even though they weren't rich or anything, there was love in the house. But that didn't last. Things started falling apart after his parents split up. That's when everything changed. His mom, who had always been a caring and loving mother, got caught up in the wrong stuff. She fell into drugs hard. Then she ended up marrying a dude who was a straight-up addict, and from there, it just got worse. Before the drugs and the new husband, his mom had been the kind of woman who looked out for all her kids, made sure they were okay. But once she got hooked, that side of her disappeared. The house that once felt like a home turned into a nightmare.
I would say when Chris was a small child, when I did not have a problem with drugs, I was a nurturing mother. I was very close to my children. I did not know what drugs were at the time. Things changed when I became divorced from his father.
Pun's stepdad was abusive as hell, and Pun was the main one catching it. Imagine being just 7 years old, and instead of just being a kid, you're the one running around the Bronx, handling grown folks' responsibilities, paying bills, making sure things didn't fall apart even more. It was way too much for a kid. And it didn't stop there. His stepdad would wake him up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and force him to do push-ups, screaming at him like he was in boot camp or something. Pun's sister saw it all go down, but there wasn't much she or anyone else could do to stop it. The abuse, the neglect, the constant pressure, it all took a toll on him. All that pain, all that anger pushed him out into the streets at a young age. He jumped off the porch early and started hustling, trying to survive, trying to get some money in his pockets. Pun got into the drug game young, and for a while, it gave him what he thought he needed: cash and a little bit of control over his life. But it didn't take long before the streets showed him how dangerous they really were. When he was around 14, he ended up getting arrested and had to spend the night in jail. Some kids go through that and don't think twice, like it's just part of the game. But for Pun, that night in a cell was enough. He realized quick that the streets weren't where he wanted to end up. He decided to leave that life behind before it swallowed him whole.
And one night in jail, and that's all it took, was that one night, and he said he was never gonna go to jail again.
But instead of being proud that he was trying to change, his mom actually kicked him out the house. See, when he was hustling, he was bringing money home. Once that stopped, she didn't want him around anymore. So there he was, just 15 years old, out on the streets, homeless.
Then he got tired. He was telling his mother that he didn't want to sell any more drugs. And he didn't want to do that anymore. So she told him, well, if you don't sell any more drugs, then you gotta leave. So she actually kicked him out because he didn't want to sell any more drugs.
He had to bounce from couch to couch, staying with friends just to have a roof over his head, just to get a meal. Around that same time, while Pun was dealing with all the chaos in his life, he found one bright spot: Liza. They met back in junior high, just a couple of kids from the Bronx who fell for each other early. What started as teenage puppy love turned into something real quick. They stuck by each other through all the ups and downs, but it wasn't smooth sailing. Liza's family wasn't exactly thrilled about their relationship. In fact, they tried to shut it down before it really had a chance to take off. They sent Liza out to Long Island, hoping that putting distance between her and Pun would cool things off. She ended up staying out there for about a year and a half. but life has a funny way of working out. Even though Lisa was gone, Pun eventually moved in with her family for a bit because they knew he had nowhere else to go. It wasn't exactly ideal, but at least it gave him a place to lay his head for a while. Then, when Liza came back to the Bronx, things got even tougher for Pun. He was right back to being homeless, bouncing between friends' couches whenever someone had space for him. Some nights he had a roof over his head, but a lot of the time he didn't. He'd stash his clothes in an abandoned building and wash them at outdoor water pumps like he was living in some kind of survival movie. By the time Pun turned 18, he was at a crossroads. He didn't have a diploma. He'd dropped out of school years before. He didn't have a job. And even though he'd walked away from the street life, he didn't have much else going for him. It was like he was standing at the edge of a cliff with no idea what his next move was supposed to be. But that's when he caught the break that changed everything. See, when Pun was just a little kid, like 4 or 5 years old, he had a nasty accident. He was playing in a local park just being a kid when he fell off a building and broke his leg bad. The details are kind of fuzzy, but apparently the city was at fault. His mom filed a lawsuit against New York back then, but you know how these things go, it dragged on for years. The case didn't get settled until Pun turned 18.
They were doing some construction in the park, and he climbed up a couple of stories up and he fell, which caused his ankle to break off, so the mother put a lawsuit and they never settled it until he was 18.
When it finally did, he got a payout of $500,000. And that money, that's what lit the fuse on his music dreams. Even though Pun had dropped out of school, he was always sharp. He kept his mind right by reading books all the time. He had a crazy love for words, and that showed in his rhymes. He'd been writing bars for years, but without the money to back himself, music had just been a passion, not a plan. Now that he had some funds, it was go time. Pun and Liza used part of the payout to get an apartment together, finally having a spot they could call their own. Just a couple months later, they made it official and got married, even though their families weren't exactly throwing a celebration about it. $500,000 sounds like a lot, and it was, but Pun knew it wouldn't last forever. He wasn't trying to blow it all without having something to show for it, so he started putting work in where his heart was, music. He linked up with a few of his boys, and together they formed a crew called Full Eclipse. From the jump, everyone around him could see Pun was different. His writing was next level. The way he could put words together, flip styles, paint pictures with his rhymes, that came from all those books he stayed buried in. Back then, he was calling himself Big Moon Dog. But everything changed in '95. That's when Pun crossed paths with Fat Joe, and that was the game changer. One day, Pun was just chilling on the block outside of a shop, doing what cats in the Bronx do, when Joe happened to come through. Pun saw his chance and spit a verse for him right there on the sidewalk. Joe was blown away. The very next day, he hit Pun up and invited him to jump on his album. That moment was when Big Moon Dog became Big Punisher. These days, it's way easier for an unknown artist to blow up. You can post a freestyle on social media, drop a track on YouTube or TikTok, and if it hits the right ears, you're off to the races. But back in Pun's era, it wasn't like that at all. If you wanted to make it, you had to grind. You had to pay dues, battle, hit up clubs, push mixtapes hand to hand, sometimes for years, before anybody even gave you a shot. But Pun was built different. He didn't have to wait that long. In '97, he dropped his debut single, I'm Not a Player. And it didn't just make noise, it charted. The track hit number 57 on the Billboard Hot 100, which was crazy for a new artist. And then when he dropped the remix, Still Not a Player, it went even harder, climbing up to number 24. That was the moment when the world really started paying attention. Then came Capital Punishment in '98, and that album shifted the whole landscape. The record was massive, it blew up, and with it, Pun made history as the first Latino rapper to ever go platinum. That was huge. He had joints that tore up parties like Still Not a Player, but he wasn't just about making people dance. He had bars, on Twins with Fat Joe, and super lyrical with Black Thought from The Roots. Pun flexed his skills in a way that made everybody stop and listen, and a lot of rappers wouldn't even want to jump on a track with Black Thought back then. Thought was known for straight up destroying rappers on their own songs. But Pun wasn't phased at all. He held his own and came through with wild, intricate verses. Just listen to him on Super Lyrical. Ayo, my rap verbal attack is actual fact. Tactical tracks match perfectly with graphical stats. Half of you lack the magical dap of tragical rap. That tackles your back in shackles and laughs at you. He was coming with the kind of rhymes that made heads rewind the tape just to catch what he said. And on Twins, he dropped one of the most famous tongue-twisting lines in rap. Dead in the middle of Little Italy. Little did we know that we riddled some middlemen who didn't do diddly. Pun wasn't just popping, he was inspiring. A whole wave of young Latino rappers saw what he was doing and thought, can do this too. He opened doors that had been closed for a long time. But while everything looked good on the surface, behind the scenes, Pun was fighting a whole different battle. When he was younger, Pun was actually athletic. He played sports, basketball, baseball, you name it. Even after dropping out of school, he'd still hit the parks and ball with whoever was out there. He was always active. But that started to change after he got that payout from the city. Thing is, before the money, he was always on the move, walking everywhere, not even having enough to eat most times. But once he had cash, it was a whole different story. Now he could drive wherever he wanted. He could hit up any spot and eat whatever he craved. And that shift hit hard. Between the ages of 18 and 21, his weight skyrocketed. He went from around 180 pounds to over 300, and it didn't stop there. The people close to him were really worried, but nobody could get him to slow down. His appetite became a way of coping. It got to a point where he didn't even want people to watch him eat. He'd hide away when he was having meals because he felt so self-conscious.
You already know, like, look at this fat eating that chicken right now.
Liza and his sisters later said a lot of it came from all the trauma from his childhood. Food became his comfort, the thing he turned to when the weight of everything he'd been through felt too heavy. By 99, things were getting critical. That's when Pun finally agreed to get help and enrolled in a weight loss program down in North Carolina. And at first, it seemed like he was turning a corner. He dropped 80 pounds, and for a moment, it looked like he was on the right path. But sadly, he left the program before it was over. And instead of keeping the progress going, he ended up gaining back the weight, and then some. It got so bad that he couldn't even bend down to tie his own shoes anymore. Pun was destroying himself with food, but that wasn't the only way his struggles showed up. He was also taking out a lot of his pain and anger on the people closest to him, especially Liza. Everybody who knew Pun says he really did love Liza deeply, but at the same time their relationship was filled with abuse. Liza later spoke about how Pun would beat her, control her, and wouldn't even let her go to school. There were times when he got so mad she genuinely feared for her life. Pun always had guns around him too, which made things even scarier. One time he was hanging out at home with Liza, his sister, and a bunch of other family members. He left a pistol lying on the couch right where kids were running around playing. His brother-in-law saw it and, thinking about the kids' safety, quietly stashed it away somewhere else. But when Pun realized his gun was missing, he lost it. He was furious. Liza found out where it had been hidden and gave it back to him, trying to calm him down. But instead, Pun's rage boiled over. He brutally pistol-whipped Liza in the face. She ran upstairs to escape him, knowing he was too heavy at that point to make it up the stairs after her. The whole thing was caught on tape, and it showed just how bad things had gotten behind closed doors.
Swung at me and hit me with the gat in my face, and my eye just went out.
And it wasn't just his family that saw Pun's dark side. People in the industry got a taste of it too. Take DJ Woo Kid for example. During that era, when mixtapes were flying off the streets and beefs between crews were always bubbling, Woo Kid got caught up in the crossfire between Terror Squad and Rockefeller. After a club incident sparked tension, diss tracks started flying. Woo Kid put a Sauce Money diss aimed at Pun on one of his tapes, and that nearly cost him. Pun called him up, told him to meet in Harlem, and Woo Kid thought he was just linking with a promoter to get paid for the tape.
Somebody tricked me into meeting them in Harlem, but it was actually Pun that was on the phone. But I thought he was a promoter.
He waited outside the Apollo expecting to pick up some cash, but instead a Benz with a young Spanish dude rolled up and led him into a housing project. Woo Kid thought he was going to meet Funkmaster Flex too, but what he actually walked into was a van full of Pun and his boys, all strapped. If Woo Kid didn't understand why he was there, Pun broke it down real quick, telling him that track had the Latin Kings laughing at him, and he wasn't about to let that slide. Thankfully, the mixtape with the diss broke, and Woo Kid walked away unharmed, but with a hard lesson learned. As Woo Kid put it later, Pun was the real gangster out of all of Terror Squad. There's a reason they were called Terror Squad. Pun really lived it.
Big Pun was like the real gangster out of the whole Terror Squad. All that other I mean, because you know, back then Terror Squad, there was a reason why their name was Terror Squad. Like, Pun really went out there and did the
After that, Pun even stormed into Rockefeller's offices to handle business himself. And let's not forget about other run-ins, like his tension with 50 Cent, or how people say he once cracked a bottle over Jay-Z's head during a heated moment. Through all this, Pun kept making noise in the game. But while his career kept rising, his health was falling apart, and deep down, Pun knew he had to do something. In February 2000, he was supposed to perform on Saturday Night Live with Fat Joe and Jennifer Lopez, but had to cancel because he just wasn't physically able. The next day, he opened up to his sister and told her he was ready to go through with the weight loss surgery she'd been urging him to get. But sadly, it was already too late. The very next day, Pun suffered a heart attack. By then, his weight had gotten so out of control that paramedics couldn't even fit him on a stretcher. They had to roll him out of the hotel on a luggage cart. They tried everything they could to save him, but Pun passed away at just 28 years old. When he died, he weighed nearly 700 pounds, and the medical examiner said his heart was almost 3 times the size of a normal one. His body just couldn't handle it anymore. Pun's death was a massive loss for hip-hop, but sadly, things weren't peaceful for his family afterward either. Liza ended up suing Fat Joe, claiming she hadn't seen any royalties from Pun's music since 2005. She said Joe was holding out on more than $2 million that rightfully belonged to Pun's family. They eventually settled the case out of court, but it was a sad way for things to go between people who had once been so close. Despite the drama, one thing hasn't changed. Pun is still loved in the Bronx. The city honored him by naming a street Big Pun Plaza, keeping his memory alive where it all began. For someone who was only in the rap game for a few short years, it's incredible how much impact he made, how his name still rings out over 20 years later. Pun was complicated. He had demons he couldn't shake, but none of that takes away from what he achieved. If he'd gotten the help he needed earlier, who knows where he'd be today? Unfortunately, that's not how it played out, and hip-hop lost one of its greatest talents far too soon. Rest in peace to Big Pun.